I played the bride's darkest secret before she walked in. I found out my fiancé spent the night before our wedding in a hotel room with my best friend, and instead of quietly canceling the whole thing, I decided to let 280 people find out at the exact same time. Hi, friends. Welcome. If you love love stories that aren't afraid to bruise, the kind where betrayal and truth collide in broad daylight, please like this video, subscribe, and before you judge me, tell me in the comments what you would have done. I wish I could say my discovery came out of nowhere, a lightning strike on a blue sky morning, but the truth is simpler and meaner. It arrived in crumbs, a pause too long between them, a laugh they swallowed when I walked in. Her phone face down. His sudden expertise in wedding minutiae he used to call frou-frou nonsense. There are 1,000 ways to set a house on fire, and they all begin with a single spark. I ignored a whole box of matches. My name is Micah Dawson. I run Dawson Home Harbor, a hardware and boat supply store that smells like cedar and rope in a Maine town called Gray Harbor, a place where you can hear gulls in the morning and, if the tide's right, your neighbors gossip by noon. I'm not rich. I'm practical. I know how to repair a dock cleat, replace a window sash, talk a stubborn outboard into purring again. That practicality made me useful during wedding planning. It also blinded me. Lila Whitmore, my fiancée, was the kind of woman who knew which fork went with which salad and why we absolutely needed a 9-piece string ensemble instead of the 3-piece I could afford. Her mother, Elaine, had a voice like cold champagne, crisp, expensive, and guaranteed to make you feel like you weren't enough. Her father, Malcolm, chaired boards and hunted quail, and believed a person's worth was best measured by their guest list. And then there was Peter. Peter Hale. We met sophomore year at the University of Maine, where he could ace a history exam without cracking the book and talk anyone into anything. He called me captain when we fished. I called him professor when he spun stories so good they had to be lies. He was going to stand beside me as my best man, smiling in photos we'd both frame for whatever future we were supposed to have. The fall before our wedding, Gray Harbor looked like a postcard, maples on fire, fog hugging the cove like a secret. The Whitmores were pulling strings faster than lobster traps after a storm. Invitations, tastings, a lighting designer who insisted on golden hour but indoors. I kept my head down, paid deposits, and told myself I'd married into a machine that needed to keep moving. The night before the wedding, we had a rehearsal dinner at the Whitmore estate, a white-shingled mansion at the end of a long drive lined with beaches. The house had that museum quiet money buys. The staff poured wine the color of blush. People in clothes that didn't rumple leaned in and said things like, "How wonderful for you," while their eyes measured me against a scale I couldn't see. Sometime during desserts that looked like the moon reflected in sugar, Lila disappeared. "Overwhelmed," her bridesmaid said, pinning a diamond earring and not looking up. A few minutes later, Peter vanished too, with a thumbs up and a promise to handle the shuttle schedule for out-of-town guests. My stomach braided itself into something hard and mean. I told myself to be rational. My mother, Ruth, gray hair in a braid, thrift store dress, a woman who never met a coupon she didn't adopt, found me on the patio. "You all right, mijo?" she asked. She's not Latina, but she picked up mijo from a nurse she worked with for 20 years and refused to let it go. "Fine," I lied. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Just tired." She took my hand. "I can't tell you to listen to your gut," she said, "but I can tell you what happens when you don't." "What happens?" I asked, though I already knew. "You live a life that's tidy from the outside," she said, "and starved on the inside." I didn't answer. She squeezed my fingers and let go. I tried to find Lila first. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried Peter. Same. I checked the driveway. Peter's truck was gone. So was the second Whitmore Town car, the one that always smelled faintly of cigar and leather. At the valet stand, a kid in a black vest told me Lila had left for some air. "Where?" I asked. He shook his head. "No idea. But Mr. Hale said he'd check on the out-of-towners at the Harborview Hotel." The Harborview sits on a hill and looks down at the cove like a benevolent monarch. The carpet in the hallways has a swirly blue pattern that suggests waves if you're drunk or lonely enough. It's where the Whitmores put their guests who didn't fit in the mansion. It's also where the staff smiles are professional enough to feel like secrets. I drove there because I had to. A part of me was sure I'd make a fool of myself, kick in the wrong door, start a war with shadows. I didn't have a master key, no trick, just an ache and a question and a face people in town recognized when they needed screws or rope or someone to carry a box to their car. The night clerk recognized me. "Captain Dawson," he said, and I almost laughed at the nickname. "You need something?" "I'm trying to find my friend," I said. "Peter Hale. And the word fiancé caught in my throat. Lila. He glanced down at the screen, then back up at me, and that was all it took. The almost flinch that happens when a person sees something they wish they hadn't. "We, have a lot of guests for the wedding tomorrow," he said. "Should be a beautiful event." "Which floor?" I asked. "Please," he swallowed. "8th. When the elevator doors opened, the hallway smelled like the lemon oil they use to wipe the brass. I walked past 812, 814, 816 as if counting could save me from the number I already knew would hurt. Around the corner, 823. The door pulled at me like the ocean. I pressed my ear against it. The TV was on, low. Footsteps, a laugh. Two voices, softened by distance but braided in a way you don't get to if you're innocent. I wasn't going to burst in. I'm not built for that kind of rage. I took out my phone instead. My hand shook so hard I could barely tap the icon. I filmed the door, the brass numbers, the bottom spill of light, the time on the lock's tiny digital face. I whispered the date like a prayer a god might hate. Then the latch clicked, as if the room itself exhaled, and I stepped back into shadow. I didn't see them, but I didn't need to. Some proofs arrive like a parade. Some come with a whisper and a timestamp. When I got back to my truck, the night had turned so clear I could see the Big Dipper tipping into the cove. I sat with the engine off and let the shape of my life rearrange itself without me. My hands remembered my mother's grip. The part of my brain that knows how to splice rope planned without me. Back at the mansion, the rehearsal had dissolved into the kind of party where people talk too loudly to ignore the way a room vibrates when something is wrong. I found the event coordinator, a woman named Bree who wore a headset like a crown, and asked about the AV setup for tomorrow's love story montage, the slideshow of childhood photos we'd put together with too many filters and not enough sense. She told me the ballroom at the Gray Harbor Yacht Club had a 200-inch screen, dual projectors, and a sound system calibrated to make God weep. "We go live at 12:01 p.m., she said. "We'll test your files at 10. "Perfect," I said, and hated the way my voice sounded, like splinters. I didn't sleep. I watched that strip of light at the bottom of 823 again and again until it became a message to myself. Believe what you know. At 5, I showered. At 6, I made coffee I didn't drink. At 7, I walked the length of my store and touched every aisle like I was saying goodbye. At 9, I drove to the yacht club with a flash drive I labeled Micah Lila Timeline. Inside the slideshow everyone expected, and, tucked behind it, 3 clips. The hotel hallway sign that read 8th floor, the door to 823, the lock's tiny screen, glowing blue with the date and time when it opened. I'd asked Bree if I could do the slideshow myself. "I want to introduce it," I said. "It's personal." She shrugged. "Groom's prerogative." By 10, the ballroom tasted like fresh linen and rich people's perfume. White chairs, white roses, white napkins folded into fans. The ocean outside was a silver coin. When Bree plugged in my flash drive, the heart-shaped photos of Lila and me lit the screen. Our childhoods in sepia. That trip to Bar Harbor where we'd held hands so tight it looked like we were trying to keep each other from drifting away. I nodded. "Looks good," I said. "One change at the top, but I'll cue it." "Got you," she said, and touched her headset. I saw my mother before the ceremony. She wore a blue dress I'd never seen. She must have bought it for this and hid it so I couldn't talk her out of spending the money. "How's your stomach?" she asked. "Like a boat in small craft warnings," I said. She kissed my cheek. "You don't have to do anything you can't live with," she said. Then softer, "And you don't have to live with anything you can't do." "I don't know what that means," I said, even though I did. "It means I'll love you if you run," she said. "And I'll love you if you don't." Noon came. The officiant, a judge who owed Malcolm Whitmore favors, cleared his throat. The quartet tucked bows to strings. Everyone stood as the side doors opened for the bridal party. But before the doors blew our lives wider, I stepped to the mic in the AV booth, high above the room, where the chandelier light looked gentler on other people's faces. "Good afternoon," I said. 280 heads turned like I'd pulled a wire. My voice sounded calm. Someone else must have loaned it to me. "Thank you for being here. Before we begin, there's a small change. You can feel a room inhale. It's a human tide line." "We were going to start with the story of how we met," I said, and clicked the remote. The screen filled with us, me at 27 with hair longer than it had any right to be. Lila at 26, cheeks lit like dawn. People made the sound crowds make when nostalgia lifts at the same time. "But stories," I said, "have chapters. And some of them happen at the very end, right when you think you know how it will go." I clicked again. The screen went black. The sound system hummed. Then, the Harborview's brass-framed sign that read 8th floor. A murmur ran like a cold spoon across the room. Another click. The close-up of 823, the blue carpet curling around its base like a wave. You could hear the quartet stop breathing. A final click. The locks glow, a digital eye, with the date and time burning so blue they felt like winter. The ballroom was so quiet I could hear a champagne flute settle on a tablecloth 4 rows back. I didn't show anything else. I didn't need to. At first there was confusion, blooming like an ink stain. Then comprehension, spreading faster than heat. Someone whispered no. Someone else said a name, and it sounded like a prayer he didn't believe in anymore. I said, "There won't be a ceremony today." And the room split into 3 kinds of people. Those who couldn't look, those who couldn't stop, and those who already knew and were pretending to be shocked. The back doors flew open, and there was Lila in a dress so white it made the walls look dirty. Her face went from joy to terror to calculation so fast it almost looked like a magic trick. Malcolm strode into the aisle, red traveling up his neck like a threat. Elaine stood so still her pearls looked glued to her throat. "Turn that off!" Malcolm shouted. "Because power is a habit, not a skill." I let the lock's blue light hang on the screen for one more breath. Then I clicked, and we were back to the slideshow, the one with toothless grins and birthday cakes. An obscenity of sweetness after what they'd seen. I turned the sound off completely. Silence has better acoustics for truth. Lila found me with her eyes, up in the booth, and for a second I saw the woman I loved. Then I saw the woman who'd stood behind a door on the 8th floor and didn't open it. "Micah," she said, and even that sounded practiced. "Please." Peter stumbled in from the side, tie crooked, hair trying to be a style. He didn't say my name. He said, "Buddy," which was worse. "Not today," I said, and put the mic down. I met them at the bottom of the stairs because some endings deserve to be walked to. Lila reached for my hands. I kept them at my sides. "It's not what it looks like," she said, and hearing the line made me sad. Not because it was a lie, but because it was so small, as if something so large and ugly could fit in a sentence we've all heard on TV. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, "and I'm done." "Micah," Peter said, palms up like a man surrendering to a storm. "I messed up." "You did," I said. "And I did too. I believed you." The judge cleared his throat like he could call the room to order. People were standing because sitting felt too complicit. My mother's face was wet but steady. Bree held her headset with both hands, as if keeping it on would keep the roof on, too. I walked past Lila and out through the side doors. The wind off the harbor hit me like permission. If you're still watching, thank you. Take a breath, sip some water. And if a story has ever asked you to choose between your dignity and someone else's comfort, hit the like button to tell the part of you that knows what's right that you hear it. By evening, I'd packed Lila's clothes into clean boxes. I wrapped the framed photos in newspaper and left the glass for the recycling truck. When I slid her dresses off my closet rod, the wood made a soft sound, as if something relieved had finally let go. I loaded everything into my truck, drove it to Elaine and Malcolm's gate, and set the boxes in a careful stack under their stone archway. I wrote a note on a scrap of lumber receipt. "These belong to your daughter. The rest of my life belongs to me." The next morning, the Whitmores came knocking. Malcolm in a suit that meant business the way thunder means rain. Elaine with a folder full of invoices and a scent like expensive gardens. Lila between them in a sweater that wanted me to remember she was soft. "You owe us," Malcolm said, and the 4 words added decades to my mother's face. "I don't," I said. "The lost deposits, the reputational harm," Elaine added, and I almost admired how quickly she moved from heartbreak to ledger. "You'll send me a bill," I said quietly, "and I'll send you back the timestamp." Malcolm stepped forward. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, as if a person's name could push a man off his own porch. "I know who I am," I said, and that turned out to be enough. They left. Lila paused and looked at me like the past was a window we could climb back through if we tried hard enough. "It was a mistake," she said, and I almost smiled because the word mistake works for missing a turn, not rearranging someone's life. I spent the next week returning gifts, canceling vendors, apologizing to relatives who'd saved for flights. I covered what my parents had spent, because being my mother's son wasn't something I was going to let the Whitmores fund. My store smelled even more like cedar, probably because I kept opening the bin just to breathe something uncomplicated. Gray Harbor did what small towns do. It talked. Some people called me cruel. Others called me brave. The truth, like the tide, was less dramatic. It just kept going. I felt grief like weather, sometimes sudden, sometimes steady. I learned that anger is heat. It warms you until it doesn't, then it just burns. A week later, my mother came by with a casserole and a stack of mail. She set the dish on my counter and the letters on my table, then reached into her purse and took out a slip of yellow paper that had lived too long against a comb and a peppermint. "This is yours," she said. "I wrote it the morning of your wedding, before I knew how it would end." I unfolded the paper. My mother's looping script filled it, the way her lists fill the front of grocery ads. "Micah," it began, "I told you last night to listen to your gut or live starving. But there's something I didn't say. The day before my wedding to your father, a woman I barely knew knocked on my door. She said she loved him. I asked him. He denied it. My mother told me to ignore it. I did. And I spent 10 years learning how to bake cakes shaped like forgiveness while he licked the frosting off other people's fingers. I stayed until I couldn't. You spent your childhood watching me apologize to an empty chair. I never wanted you to inherit my silence, the note continued. If you walk down that aisle, I'll still love you. But if you don't, I'll bring the car around and keep the engine warm. I looked up at her. She was smiling, but it was the kind that comes after crying. I didn't bring the car, she said. You didn't need it. Thank you, I said. The words didn't feel big enough. Maybe they never are. Little by little, my life grew around the gap. I learned the harbor at dusk has the same color as relief. I started running again because I needed proof my heart could do more than break. At the store, Mrs. Bell, who's 80 if she's a day, told me her bathroom sink sang like a sad flute and laughed when I fixed it with a washer I didn't charge her for. People are the truest kind of wealth I know. I kept the flash drive not because I wanted to punish anyone, but because sometimes a person needs to hold the thing that wrecked them to understand that it's small, plastic, and memory. It takes a human to make it mean anything. Months later, I saw Peter at Joe's bar, the same stool where we'd planned fishing trips and pretended we weren't sad. He looked older and younger at the same time, like guilt had sanded him down and relief had shined him back up halfway. He didn't see me. I watched him lift a glass to his lips and thought about all the toasts we'd made to things we hadn't earned. I left before he turned. Outside, the night air tasted like salt and something sweet I couldn't name. I walked to the end of the public pier and let the boards creak under my weight and the dark take what light it wanted. If you've ever had to choose your own peace over someone else's approval, I hope you choose you. If you need a sign, let this be it. And if you stayed to the end, thank you. Like, subscribe, and tell me below, what chapter of your story did you rewrite when you thought the ending was already printed? Because here's the twist I didn't see coming. The day you refuse to marry a lie is the day your life says, finally, I've been waiting to begin.